he doesn't really understand the first thing about the Federal Reserve. But what's worse is that he doesn't care. Because
well, that's my point.
He's fat and happy. And it's so frustrating, sir. I mean, what happened to the heart of this country?
Well, I think it's partly conditioning.
Like millions of his fellow Americans, John Q. Public earns enough money to keep up the payments on a new car. He takes great pride in owning a fine, new, long-term mortgaged home that was built to last a lifetime. Mrs. John Q. Public no longer finds housework fatiguing drudgery, thanks to a host of labor-saving devices.
We have an organization you probably know. It's called Freedom Force International, and it's a group of people all over the world who are united and resolved to do something about it. We have a plan for recapturing control of our systems, and the reason I mention that is because I'm in contact with people in we have members in 68 countries now, and we've just formed a new chapter of Freedom Force in Sweden. And we have members in Sweden and Norway and all the Scandinavian countries, and I get the same story there, particularly the activists there, the ones who really want to make a difference, are saying, the people here are so conditioned, and they don't want to stand out. They don't want to go against the crowd. Their collectivist mentality is like a beehive mentality. Mm-hmm. They would just want to be a part of the group, and they don't like to make waves, and they trust they feel that they should trust their authorities, because if they don't, there's nothing they can do about it anyway. So I go on, and they tell me about this mentality that you're just describing. But I guess in Scandinavian countries, they've had this condition longer than we have. And it's really a dilemma, because many people are conditioned almost from the cradle to not make waves and certainly not go against consensus. So I think it's partly a conditioning and educational process, and our schools have been greatly responsible for that, because, we teach our kids to be, quote, good citizens. That means, don't do anything different. Don't challenge the teacher. Just follow the rules and be a good citizen. Be a team player. Well, sure, there's some value to team playing, but there's also a time when you want to stand up for yourself and for the rights of others, and you may have to go against the team. So, but that trait is not taught, and it's not encouraged in our schools. And I guess in every collectivist society, one of the roles of the educational system is to get that out of the mental climate of the students, so they always think in terms of following orders and going along with a group.
Sure. Well, it's been engineered out to a large degree, hasn't it? I mean, whether we talk about the Rockefeller Foundation or inevitably we seem to get back to these same powers that are in control of our monetary system, that have taken control over society at large, and to some extent dumbed down society to make society less engaged and less libertarian, less focused on things like truth and honor.
Exactly, yes.
I think it was chapter, was it 25, in which you wrote Time Travel into the Future, a Pessimistic Scenario?
Yes.
You really laid out what was going to happen, and it's all happening now, isn't it?
Yes, it's amazing. I surprised myself. It was a whimsical journey into the future. I thought, okay, if this continues as it's going, where is it going to be? So that's when I wrote that chapter. And I thought it was kind of extreme when I wrote it, but as you just alluded, today, reading it, much of it has already happened. And the rest of it is rapidly unfolding as we speak.
There is also the story of the value of the dollar, which may decrease. How does this happen? Why does the value of the dollar decrease?
As we talk about this monetary system that's really done such damage to our republic over the past 100 years, we've just surpassed the debt ceiling. Apparently government hasn't shut down. They're somehow making this thing continue. People are talking about QE3. My question for you is, are the bankers, are the owners of this system at any risk from the collapse which now seems inevitable? Or is it all part of the grander design to move us directly into a one-world government and a one-world currency?
I think under the present conditions, with the near complete control that the banking institutions have over the governments of the world, I don't think there's much chance of the owners of the banks suffering, because they'll always just pull the strings and go to their legislative bodies, and they'll simply authorize the creation of more money out of thin air to bail out the banks. That's the way they have done it, and right now there's no serious challenge to that power to do so. So I think that's what they're going to continue to do, and of course that simply means they'll continue to plunder the taxpayers and send that money into the banks, into their closest associates.
The Federal Reserve Bank is set up to handle thousands of checks from hundreds of banks in a single day. The banks and the corporations which are clustered around the banks. So I don't think there's much danger from that point of view. But the second point you mentioned is also, I agree with that. I think that these people are smart enough to know. They know the problems that we're talking about, perhaps even better than we, because they're the ones that are creating the problems. But I think they also have already figured out a way to perpetuate it so that it will not affect them, and that is to create a one-world monetary system where there's no place to escape. If we have an IMF or an international, let's say a UN, a central bank of some kind that replaces the Federal Reserve or works in coordination with it, with all the other central banks of the world, and they unite and they create a central global fiat currency manufacturing factory of some kind, then the process just simply continues, and all the banks participate in it. They'll be allocated their share of the plunder, and the people will just continue to be plundered, that's all. But it'll be done on an international basis, finally, instead of on a national basis.
So despite the trillions of dollars poured into the banking system since 2008, we see manufacturing ISM at the lowest level since the Lehman collapse. Goldman's cutting non-farm payroll forecast to 100,000. The money they poured into the system has not fixed the problem. So at the end of the day, how do we protect ourselves? What would you recommend for your brood? I note in your book, Creature from Jekyll Island, you've dedicated it to the next generation. You say, especially my own brood, James, Daniel, Ralph, and Kathleen. Sir, you care about people, and that's what we love about you. How can we protect people that are listening to this?
Well, there's actually two aspects to that as I see it. One is we have to do whatever we can to protect ourselves in the short term, and that means basically a combination of getting out of debt, getting as much put aside as we can to cover us through emergencies. That means food. That means making sure that you're living in a secure place and that you have a lot of friends and family around you, because when things fall apart, as they have, I should say, in just every other country in the world, when crisis hits, people need friends and family to fall back on. But get out of debt, and if you have any disposable wealth after that, I would definitely put it into gold and silver and food, and that's the short term. That doesn't really solve a problem. It's just help you perhaps survive a little bit longer and a little bit better than others, but it doesn't take care of the long picture because the crisis continues. For the long picture, which is where I spend most of my time thinking about, we have to retake the system back.
Only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it.
We have to get these people out of control. We have to recapture our governments. We have to teach people the value of individualism as opposed to collectivism. We have to show them the reasons why they should reject all of these panaceas that have been offered to them. And that's going to take a little time, but I think it can be done. That's the reason we created Freedom Force International, by the way. And I know we don't have time to go in all of that, but for anybody that really wants to focus on the long view of history and think in terms of what we can do now to lay the foundation for an eventual recovery, I urge you to come to the Freedom Force website, which is www.freedomforceinternational.org, freedomforceinternational.org. and there's a lot of reading there. But you'll see what our strategy is and what our philosophy is. And I think for anybody that's really serious about this and is willing to look at the long view instead of just that short view, what are we going to do between now and the next election, I think you're going to find the answer on the Freedom Force website.
Okay, and I know we can also find you at therealityzone.com and Unfiltered News, correct?
Thanks for reminding me on that. We have a free newsletter. It's called Unfiltered News. And if you come to therealityzone.com, it won't take you long before you'll see an icon that'll take you to the Unfiltered News. And you can Google that, too, as a matter of fact, and see what our current issue looks like. And then just send us your email, sign up for it. It's free, and I think you'll like that, too.
All right. Well, G. Edward Griffin, it was a pleasure speaking with you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Sean, thank you. And you keep up this great work you're doing.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, are you in Freedom Force?
No, I should join, and in fact, maybe I should.
Of course you should.
Well, let's have a call to action for viewers to really get on board. Is that something, can the common man like me, can my viewers, can my subscribers join Freedom Force? That's what it's all about, huh?
That's what it's all about, yes. Yeah, well, anybody can join if they agree with the principle expressed in the Creed of Freedom. That's it. And you will, I know you will. That's one of the things about Freedom Force is that we want everybody in agreement with a certain philosophy. Otherwise, what's the point? We'll be arguing with ourselves otherwise. But yes, the answer is anybody that agrees with the Creed of Freedom is more than welcome. And the amazing thing, Sean, is that this creed will appeal as much to people in Russia and in Afghanistan and in China as it does in America and Canada and England and Australia. I mean, it's universal. Everybody longs for this individual liberty. And once they understand what the foundations are, that's like an epiphany that will never be undone. It's just like ringing the bell. Once the bell is rung, you cannot unring the bell.
That's right. Well, G. Edward Griffin, you're one of our favorite people. We really, really respect and admire you, and I thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to speak with us today, sir.
All right. Thank you, Sean. It's been my pleasure.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Guys, thanks so much for watching. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be doing these. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for all your support. Good night.